This is Esports Samaritans. As the name implies, we're just trying to do some good in the world of esports. There's too much bad shit out there. And, I've gathered here today a bit of a roundtable. I've brought on Adam Fitch, who's now the head of business content over at Dexerto. He's been a longtime reporter in the esports space. Don't let him tell you otherwise either. In the bottom left-hand corner, we got Muenster, the current coach of the New England Whalers. And in the bottom right-hand corner, we got mCe, Matt, who is the current coach of Chaos Esports Club. Now, being as the Whalers and Chaos, at least reportedly, have been looking to exit CSGO, I've decided to bring on some of these people for seemingly obvious reasons. You might be able to guess what this episode is about if you've taken a look at the at sort of the roster we have here. Adam figures into it in a bit of a different way because he's been reporting on the numbers for a while, and he's been sort of behind the scenes doing the math, making sure that he's been a little bit more in front of the scene. So I'm going to start things off with asking him, and we're going to get everybody's take on this because this is essentially the foundation for which we're going to talk about this in the future. So, Adam, I want to ask you what you believe is causing all of the orgs that have exited CS most recently to actually do that. Is there something in particular that is a sort of unifying factor in your mind that is causing some of these orgs to pull out in some cases, maybe earlier than people would expect?
I'd say the if you really dial it down, profitability is obviously the main thing, right? Because I don't think at this point people are starting organizations and taking on investment to not make money out of this. They're just doing it as some fucked up like fan project or like passion project, So I'd suggest that it all boils down to that, and there are multiple factors that can go into it in terms of like overinflated salaries and just a lack of return in CS:GO, for example. But I think that is the basis of it, and it's been like, how do I put it? It's taken a while for things to catch up and people to actually say, okay, shit, we need to get out of this now. And maybe that's been accelerated by COVID and the lack of like offline events. But I say it certainly comes down to making money or the lack of actually ability to make money right now in multiple titles, especially CS.
Matt, you've been in the scene for forever, it feels like. So I wanted to ask you a little bit about sort of jumping off of the point of profitability. Do you think that orgs were a little too reckless with their spending from what you remember from back in the day and even maybe more recently?
I mean, absolutely. You hear about some of the salaries that people get that, with branding and stuff makes sense, but it's like the whole time you're just sitting there like, how is this sustainable? Like, there's no way paying somebody like a $20,000 salary a month for one player is like balancing out at all. So I think, I have always joked that like esports is money laundering and there's like no other way around it because it's like very difficult to make a profit, I guess. And you have to, like when you're running a business, to hopefully offset losses pretty much. It's like very, very difficult to go about it that way. So.
All right, Muenster, I wanted to get your take on this whole angle as well. And from what I recall from the news release when New England Whalers announced their last dance, as it were, one of the things that they had mentioned was that I believe that one of their sponsors decided to back out on them, or one of their defining ones. Assuming that that is the case, maybe you can shed some light on the sponsorship angle, because that's supposed to offset profitability for a lot of these orgs. Is it just too difficult to make that happen in the CS space, do you think? Or do you think that maybe you just have to go elsewhere for the sponsors? And even if you have just more thoughts on the specific angle that affected the Whalers, we'd be happy to hear from that as well.
So for our organization, I don't really know much of what was going on the business side of things. I do know that the investor that pulled out was their only investor. So with like COVID and everything that's going on in the scene right now, they just didn't see the Whalers as something that could make them money, so they decided to pull out a little early. I also know from talking to Diego, who was the co-founder of the Whalers, a little bit, he said that as much as he tried to secure like additional sponsorships and stuff like that, it just wasn't happening for them. There was just no money there, he thought, and the people were just really reluctant to try and get into the scene, even at the level that we were performing at. So,
this is something that I've heard a lot. Go ahead, Matt.
Like I know Chaos had a lot of different deals fall through. At the very beginning of COVID, they had a couple different things that, whenever that started happening and the economy tanked, it was like, all of a sudden all this stuff dried up, all this money disappeared. Instead of brand deals giving out potential money and stuff, it's like product deals and nothing more. So like, unless you were one of like the big orgs, like, and I don't even know how well they did, to be fair, but you know, unless you already had this stuff set in stone, it become very difficult to secure, you know, partnerships and things like that, which is, you know, one of the things that didn't help out Chaos, at least.
Adam, do you think that the sponsorship angle in CS is overblown? Do you think that people complaining about, you know, the game itself being an issue? Obviously, we're talking now about the COVID pandemic and how that's affected things even more negatively. But even before this happened, people were taking the angle that you just can't find sponsorships for Counter-Strike teams.
Yeah, well, I think it's exposed the fact that we're over reliant on sponsorships. Like there are other ways to make money, and maybe they're not being explored right now. You kind of see that Cloud9 and Liquid and Envy are exploring the kind of membership aspects. Fnatic are doing crowdfunding, which I actually think is just fan engagement incognito. And look, they're at least exploring new ways of doing things, right? When I say new, it's new to esports, not necessarily new overall. Even though like SK Gaming did it in like 2004, I think, with SK Insider. But nonetheless, like we're over reliant on sponsorship, and then you add in the fact that, of course, hopefully we're not going to get into this whole debate of like terrorists and red blood and bombs and such. But like that is a hindrance, right? Like even in Valorant, where I'm pretty sure there's not red blood and like it's not inherently violent, and you maybe don't see dead bodies on the floor. Like there's still problems there, and I probably shouldn't say it, but I'd say a potential maybe like a pizza company, a company that specializes in pizza, has a problem with Valorant, for example, and they sponsor a team that perhaps competes in Valorant, and maybe that makes things difficult when you are trying to do sponsored pieces and activations for them. Obviously, an elaborate example there, and definitely not a reality at all. But I'd say, yeah, we're just over reliant on sponsorships and the same kind of sponsorships as well. It's the same companies over and over and over. It's Monster Energy and it's all that bullshit, as opposed to someone doing something new. And yeah, I don't think like sending products like keyboards and energy drinks and Pringles or something like that is actually going to pay the bills at all. So maybe we should be exploring something else. And maybe COVID is an awakener for many people. Like, oh shit, yeah, the way we've been doing business is just bad business overall. And also for some of the teams out there, like raising VC capital, raising venture capital is not a revenue stream. So sort your shit out.
Yeah, that venture capital angle was also a pretty big one. For the longest time, teams were essentially taking on investment or securing investment, but not necessarily having a plan that would immediately turn a profit or immediately give them some sort of ROI. So given if we dial this back just to the Counter-Strike angle specifically, we talked a bit about the sponsorship stuff. The question that then comes to mind is, how can we end up having some sort of engagement in terms of profitability for some of these organizations that can be grassroots within the scene, as opposed to something that comes externally, like a sponsorship, for example. So one of the things that comes to mind is like branded items, but obviously Valve has been very like sort of closed door on that particular front. Do you guys is there anything else that comes to mind as to maybe instead of making more money, instead managing the money that you're spending a little bit more intelligently? Like Matt, you obviously talked about player salaries and stuff like that. Have you seen a bit of a sea change recently since things have changed?
I mean, I think it's more so like those guys are always going to have something like that, and for good reason in certain instances. Like I'm not going to name names because I don't want to get in trouble, but like the Brazilian Godfather obviously has a huge, you know, following where he might deserve a little bit more than, you know, other people. But it's like when he's making that much money, it becomes instantly difficult where like, you know, one person is funding like, for instance, like 4 months of the Whalers' salary pretty much for 1 month. So like, and just in my opinion, that's like, so like, how are you ever going to balance that? And that's only one player. I mean, I think he deserves it. Like, he is who he is for a reason. His brand is huge, but it's like, I think one of the ways that you could fix it, and I thought about this the other day, is like you have to have some form of, you know, like league entity for everything. And I thought about like if you could set salaries or cap salaries or whatever, how different would the landscape, you know, look? You know, if I could get Nitro for, let's say, this is just numbers, but like 5,000 a month, and I could try an upcomer. Hang on a little bit.
It's a drive-by. They're coming for you.
Yeah. So if you could get Nitro versus like let's say an up and comer like Zeppa for the same price, like you're gonna look into maybe getting an up and comer as well as like Nitro for the same cost. So like it weighs out the benefits, but like I think it would be a cool idea to have like a pooled league where it's like not necessarily franchising, same kind of idea, but not as expensive, and you manage the money better. Where it's like Chaos buys into this league, and the monthly salary for 6 months of the league, you say, 5,000 for each player, 30,000 a team for 5 months. So 108 or 150K, like goes into the league from Chaos. Then Cloud9 comes in 150K, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So they all help crowdfund like the league or whatever if you want to place, and then you almost do like a draft style event where it's like you pull out a number and it's like, okay, now you can pick your players or pick a team or whatever. And then like you go from there. I think that would be a unique situation. I don't think anyone would ever do it by means because like, certain players, some of the Brazilian guys don't speak the best English. And obviously like some of the French scene, like Zaiwu notoriously in the interview years ago, like didn't know English at all. I'm not sure if he's better now or not, but like you could run into issues that way. But it would be a very unique aspect, and like everybody provides like X amount, and then maybe the league covers part of the salary as well with some of the money they would give out. And then you would see, I think then you would see more orgs maybe get involved or stay involved because the cost would be more like readily available to everyone instead of being like, oh, if I want to have a top 30 team, like I have to dish out X amount of dollars. It's like, well, by this idea, we have a chance to like put together a cool team or like an all-star event or, whatever that I think people would watch and you'd still get good viewership numbers, but you could potentially give something new on Counter-Strike where it's like, instead of the Astralis guys, like, stomping for that year that they stomped, just have like a 5-month period and like an event or something that it's like, oh, we now have Zaiwu paired with Glaive paired with, a Liege or something, and that would be a new exciting way to engage fans to like see something different in the scene. Obviously it would ruin everything else that's going on, but I just think it would be like a neat draft style event or whatever, almost like the CGS but better run. So
no, CGS is a good shout as well. I mean, a lot of the things that you were saying seem inspired a lot by traditional sports in some ways. I was curious, Muenster, if you have any ideas from that angle or from another case that might help to sort of mitigate the expenses or to improve the income or anything like that. Something that you've seen from your perspective as a coach.
I mean, I kind of like what Matt was saying, as hard as that would be to implement. But from my side, like I've only been a coach for a team making money for as long as I've been on the Whalers. Like this is my first paid opportunity. So I don't really know much of what goes on in terms of like salaries with players and sponsorships and brand deals and all that kind of stuff. Like I was never exposed to that before I joined the Whalers. Being on the Whalers now, it kind of opened my eyes up to like a whole other side of the scene. But I don't think I'm like experienced enough to talk on something like that.
No, well,
So
what we
I
can
don't
ask
want to
from
like
your...
talk out of my ass and
Oh,
like
sure,
say
sure.
something stupid,
Well, what we can ask then is, what was the change, or what were some of the most notable changes going from the orgs that would be classed as bedroom orgs almost, or something where you weren't under a salaried position, going from there into the Whalers?
I was never on an org before the Whalers.
Okay.
I was always just in the team, like looking for an org,
Right. So
Yeah.
what were was there something in particular that stood out about the Whaler structure that you could speak to, as far as you've had talks with the founder, Mr. Diego, right?
Yeah, he did a lot on the manager side, so it was like we were in pretty close contact for the most part. I really don't know. Like he would always be talking about like how he's trying to find new sponsorships and stuff and how difficult it is. And I joined the team after COVID had already hit, so I don't really know what it was like for him looking for
Right.
sponsorships before COVID. I don't know if it was easier, more difficult, like what the process was. But I really think like orgs and investors kind of what's the word I'm looking for? They got really scared when COVID came around, like worrying about their investments, and it made them kind of walk on eggshells. And as soon as they saw like a hit when Valorant came around to players leaving and viewership kind of dipping a little bit, like they just instantly decided to just back out for the time being. Whereas I feel like if they had decided to maybe hold out a little bit longer, maybe think of it more as like a risk reward thing, like, okay, we're going to play the long term game here and hopefully things pan out. Like Counter-Strike has shown, it's been around for so long, like it's shown that it can get through like a lot of things and it's only ever gone up. So I don't really see how in my opinion, I don't see how COVID should have hit the scene this hard. And uh looking for orgs right now, because obviously we're free agents now, like we're not seeing anything. Like we're not getting responses from anybody. The people who are responding are like very, very, very low, and they're not even offering anything at all. They're just basically asking to put their name on our team, and that's it. Like it's really hard right now, and I don't know what it's going to look like moving forward in terms of money in the scene.
Yeah. So what he's saying right here as well is that like it's almost like the investor angle or version of CSGO is a dead game because Valorant showed up. Valorant kills CSGO. You know, like all that stuff. So when people see a new game on the block or they see something that comes out, and they instantly assume. I mean, we had the same deal with Overwatch, if you guys can remember that far back, where people were concerned that Overwatch might end up eating up too much of the attention away from Counter-Strike. And obviously, we all saw how that went. That obviously fizzled out relatively quickly. So if we look to Valorant, it seems like maybe with Riot backing it instead of Blizzard, there might be a different fate. But already we're back to record player numbers. There's still plenty of records going on with viewerships happening, where it might not be in terms of record breaking, but it's adjacent to record breaking numbers. And given that there's that not that far away, it seems strange to me why orgs would be pivoting more so towards Valorant. And that's one of the reasons why I also brought up the whole, like, is CS2 controversial to be sponsored angle, because that also didn't really make any sense to me. So Adam, what's your take on the Valorant angle here? How did Valorant actually affect the CS profitability angle? Is it all like smoke and mirrors? Did people just imagine it? Or, sort of to what Muenster was saying, was it fear? Or do you think that there was a real reason, a real credible threat there?
I think part of it is wanting to get in early, right? And with everybody wanting to get in early, it was just became like a bidding war for the best players. And then these players who are already greedy bastards have gone, yes, okay, I can demand whatever I want and play, I don't know, two random orgs, like play Liquid versus Liquid and G2 against each other, for example, like teams with money, and say, look, well, Liquid want me for 15K. What are you going to offer me? You know what I mean? Like, there's leverage there. And I think part of it just comes from reputation from Riot Games. We've seen how successful League of Legends is. I actually think it's very, very commercially stable right now with media right deals going on and stuff that's not even being reported. But you probably saw like the Billy like $113 million deal just for Chinese language streams of Worlds. Like the potential there is insane. So if they can bring that level of success and or at least kind of replicate it for a shooter as much as you can to Valorant, then that's a much more commercially viable game instantly, just from what we've seen. And I think that there are bound to be companies out there that do want to sponsor in Counter-Strike, right? You just got to look for like the 18 plus brands, for example. What Flashpoint are doing now and really leaning into things instead of trying to act like, oh, this is squeaky clean, really. Oh, there's not terrorist stuff in here. Fuck it, man. Let's have swearing, let's have banter. Who really cares? Like, look, the game's already 18 plus. Like, if you're into this, you know what you're going to get. So let's lean into it more. Like, let's get Durex in here. Let's fuck it. You know what I mean? Let's get some outrageous brands. Like, are we pitching to the same, like safe ones all the time? Those that we seem as endemic to the scene? Or are we really thinking outside of the box? And also, just what was mentioned earlier about like COVID making it tough for sponsors and stuff, I don't see that angle at all. Like, there's more eyes on gaming than ever right now. So you look like McDonald's, they sponsored Atlanta Rain, and Popeyes with Huntsman and COD, and that's a shooter game. Like, you know what I mean? It's just excuses. It's just convenient how all of these organizations now have COVID to blame when they were not running great beforehand. So for me, I don't know. I think Valorant is somewhat of a CS killer, but not in terms of playability, just in terms of viability. I think it's going to do everything right that CS has done wrong, because Riot Games have figured out a model that works for them, and they're not shy of taking over a game entirely, which is obviously something Valve is never going to do. And that sort of reliability is something that's very, very, very interesting and promising to those who are willing to invest millions into a game.
Yeah, I think more so, I think there's a misconception on the sponsorship money, because people have confused sponsors and investment money. Where when people are talking about COVID stuff or whatever, they're like, oh yeah, well, we have this investment or whatever. Like, that's not the same deal as a sponsor deal. Where, like, yes, the market crash, stuff like that, there's less investment money, but in my opinion, you shouldn't be relying on that anyways. Like, that's a very hard thing to return on profit on. But yeah, I agree that, like, people are excited about Riot. I think the two dangers, or the biggest danger, is Riot after all this time steps in and they're like, oh, we're not going to do anything for Valorant. And then that's where you're going to see, like, massive panic. Because, like you said, these orgs are getting in early, and I think they're doing the right thing. Like, I, for one, have looked to the college scene as well. And one of the people at the school that was trying to recruit me at a point was asking me, like, what would I do? And I said, if I had the choice between, like, CSGO and Valorant, I would probably try to push Valorant at my school, because the League of Legends angle in college is so much more complete. You just saw Golden Guardians pick up a couple guys from the Maryville team. And in general, if I have to bring in guys as a college director or head coach to learn an FPS game or to teach them, it's going to be much easier to teach somebody like Valorant than it would be Counter-Strike, where they're both similar games in the fact that, like, they're shooters, whatever. Like, the intricacies to be more of a top-level Counter-Strike player, I think, are much more difficult than moving towards, like, the Valorant side. Like, you're going to have people that are naturally better at Valorant because it's quote-unquote easier to play. Whereas, like, Counter-Strike, think of the years that people put in, or, like, even Zywoo and those guys that are your prodigies are still putting in years and years and years and then hitting that. Whether that's 1 year, 2 years, playing 5,000, 10,000 hours. Versus Valorant, I think, is a much easier game overall. And I'm excited. I hope the college leagues develop more, where you can start to have, like, a farm system where, like, the League of Legends is the perfect example. And, like, I, for one, am excited because they're hands-on with the game. And I think for Counter-Strike to really continue to shine and develop and be that mainstay game, Valve has to step in at some point and help with something. Or, they already have everything in place for the international in Dota that I'm shocked it hasn't been more mirrored over towards the CS side.
Yeah, well, there's a certain response that people would have when you consider that so many people have essentially dedicated their lives, especially their early lives when they're, in their prime physically. That a lot of the time these young kids have decided, I'm going to pour all of these hours in. They need that ecosystem that, Muenster, you were talking about earlier, where they need the teams to be able to do more than just say, oh, put our name on in front of your name or whatever, put our organization in front of your team name, stuff like that. So they need a little bit of that sort of infrastructure. And one of the sort of more psychological questions or angles in general is if we were to be a fly on the wall in the Whalers camp when some of those announcements were going on, how did you guys generally respond to that sort of thing? I'm curious as to, like, what was the thought process moving forward when you guys got the news, essentially?
I mean, our contracts were already close to coming to an end before we got the news, but we kind of had a feeling something like this was coming. We hadn't really been getting a lot of good news recently, and we kind of just took it like, I guess this is just the way it is, and we just got to move forward and just keep looking, and hopefully somebody realizes what Counter-Strike can be and what our team can be and are willing to take that chance on us. Really, we just want to keep playing the game. Like, our players don't want to switch over to Valorant. So we're just doing everything we can to stay together and stay in the game that we all like so much.
Yeah, well, that's another angle too.
Players.
Sorry, go ahead, Matt.
What was it?
I said I'm going to take one of your players.
I would hate you. Please don't.
the angle that I have here is that like you guys just cracked into the top 30 HLTV. So like that is an achievement unto itself. I mean, even if we just look at the North American regional rankings where we see all of the North American specific teams, and you imagine as a sponsor coming in to the scene and trying to pick a team to invest in, maybe the teams that they're too high, I mean, they're already very sponsor heavy. They're also a situation where maybe they're going to ask for a certain amount of money that I'm not willing to dole out. But these mid-tier, middle of the table teams, that, especially ones that are on an upwards trajectory that could go all the way up to the top or have shown the potential to go higher, those are the teams that have access to all of these endemic sort of the demographic of the North American spender, right? Which is pretty much the key demographic that all of these sponsors are looking for. And I'm just puzzled as to why, essentially, like I think the sentiment we're all sharing is like we're curious as to why the sponsorships are not really connecting here. Like it seems like there's value here. There's obviously value in terms of the numbers of eyes on the screens when it comes to these professional game streams. There's numbers specifically correlating to, you get more viewers the higher ranked you are in theory, and the more matches that you play in that sense. So if a team is on the upward trajectory, then there's something in theory there. So essentially, I mean, anybody can take this one. I'm curious as to like what your angles are when it comes to essentially what people are missing, not just necessarily the sponsors themselves, but maybe the teams too. Is in like Adam talked about, maybe the teams are going towards the wrong kinds of sponsors. Maybe they're playing to the safe ones, and maybe the tournament organizers aren't laying into the 18 plus stuff enough, like we saw in Flashpoint. So there's a lot of different angles here, but this is pretty much for anybody who wants to speak on it.
I love the idea to go after these off-brand, things that I myself have never been one for words. I love the offensive stuff. I love like the jokes that could be made, like whether Adam are meant to make the pun or not, or he's like, let's go after Durex. Fuck it. Like there's your fucking ad campaign right there in a team. That it's like there's so many opportunities, but like alcohol is one, for instance, that Diego talked about on a podcast with Joe Cardali and I am gonna forget the guy's name that it's his podcast. I'm so sorry. But he talks about a certain amount of your viewer demographic has to be proven to be over like 21 to be able for them to even like start to come in. So I think there are limitations. I think there's a lot more people out there besides like HyperX and Logitech and whatever that isn't being explained. And like Adam laughs at that because he knows those are, the big ones that people go after. Yeah. So, they like there's so many things that aren't being explored, and I think people need to have a bigger idea or like mindset for these things. Because like Rogue, for instance, they have Kia. Like you see these car dealerships and things coming in as well that like are like, who would have ever thought when esports started that like Mercedes was going to be a sponsor or BMW or something. And like there's other people out there that I'm sure would chip something in or whatever to help. It's just have people ask or even thought about, going at that angle, et cetera, et cetera.
The thing is, I'd say like premium brands, just like the automotive brands, for example, they only want to be associated with the premium teams and such as well. So I think by association, like so if I have the option to go for the biggest teams in the industry, no matter what, I'm going to do that. It's going to cost me more, but I'm going to theoretically get more value because they've got the bigger followings and stuff as well. So I think that's an aspect. But sorry for stepping on your toes.
I mean, that's absolutely true. It's like if a team has a chance to invest into, Chaos or Cloud9, like obviously they're going to pull towards Cloud9. Like it's already a recognizable brand. They're bigger. Like in theory, everything should be better off for them pretty much. So like, I think it is harder for like the Whalers, especially, or somebody like that to compete against some of these teams. And that's where the creativity needs to come in to go to like these weird off brands. Like everybody goes after Monster. Everybody goes after, G Fuel, these things. Like, what about things like Crystal Light or Kool-Aid? Like, get creative, try to find, something else, or, I just think everybody thinks too small. When like Counter-Strike first started, like all of us were playing for pride. It's like even when you went to a LAN and won, money in the early days, it's like wasn't that much money. Like I've gone to LANs and won, a trophy that I didn't even get, and then like a keyboard. You know, they're like, so it's crazy having been in the scene from like early Counter-Strike and or CSGO to like now of like how much it's developed. And I think people are getting to the point where they're being too greedy. Like you said, it's like, you know, G2 is going to pay me 15. Like if you give me 20, I'll come for that. And it's like, that's so much money. Like, oh my God, that's outrageous. Like, but, and then you have those same guys that are like, they're not going to come on a podcast. They're not going to do these things. They're not going to market. And I think that's a big issue in itself as well.
That's something I was going to bring up, is that players, in my opinion, aren't doing anywhere near enough to raise their own value, or at least kind of fulfill the value that they're being paid for. Like doing well in a game is obviously one part of it, but there's so many other ways you could at least raise your own kind of market price, you know. And like Fallen, I don't know if he does a lot of stuff like endemically to Brazil, like locally in terms of content creation and stuff. But he had like a Gamer Club, right? Gamers Club or whatever, which got purchased by IGC, and I think he probably has a stake in it still, which I don't know if that makes it awkward when he inevitably moves on. But also something I was thinking, but like, so the team's New England Whalers. Is it like based in New England, or is it partnered with like a sports team or something? Because maybe that localization makes it more difficult to tap in because it seems like a local team.
No, I don't think that it has anything. I think the only thing that came with the name was the fact that Diego lives in Massachusetts, Boston. So
Originally,
I don't really know much about what went into picking the name, to be honest.
I remember very originally, I don't know if it was the same sponsorship group, like what Dignitas and the 76ers, the ownership is like all the same as the New Jersey Devils. I swear they had something to do with the New England Patriots. When they first came into the seed, when they first came into the seed, like I am almost positive they had like, it could have been that same like investment cap firm or whatever that they own the Patriots and this was like a side project or something. But like I distinctively remember when they got that South American roster that like there was something to do with that. So that might have been the investors pulled out or like whatever. Don't quote me, but like I swear there was something with the Patriots in that team.
Yeah, well, that's even an angle that you could, in theory, like up the local and sort of, angle to take. You could just say, hey, we're the New England Whalers, and we, sponsored by. Like at that point, you could just play more towards that endemic side of things. And but the name is admittedly somewhat puzzling because I think aside from, like you said, Muenster, Diego living in Mass, there's not really too many people who are in that area. I think one of the nearest players is off in, was it Ohio or Idaho or something like that? So
it would be me and B Wills. We were both Pennsylvania.
Oh, okay, yeah. So that's the closest you got.
Chowder sponsorship.
Well, we have a couple of different places we can go from here. One of the things that I wanted to cycle back on was if we think back to the angle that I was taking about the teams going up on the up, they're in the upward trajectory. We talked about the sponsors that are premium sponsors that want to be associated with the premium teams. So there's a lot of stuff that's rising to the top here in terms of the sponsorships that are always going towards the top. But something that Matt brought up is there's sponsors that are not seen as endemic because they haven't been in here for a while. There's sponsors like, in theory, like if you wanted to get a Kool-Aid sponsor or a Crystal Light sponsor, like as humorous as it was as a thought process, it's something. There you go. There's a sponsorship opportunity right here, right now. But the other thing too is that there's so many different opportunities that people would have in theory. Maybe they would have to go hunting for them. Like, I mean, I'm not sure what your guys' take is on the idea of essentially sort of soliciting sponsors as opposed to the sponsors going to the teams themselves. But I almost feel like maybe until you've made it in a sense that almost has to be the way that things go down. So like Adam, what's your take on like essentially what like how teams could be approaching completely different sponsors? Would it be appropriate for a team to say, hey, you should sponsor my team. Here's a sort of list of reasons why, or almost putting together like a resume for the team itself?
Yes, I have a bunch of friends who work partnerships in some of the biggest organizations. Like, yes, they actively go out and call potential sponsors and try and bring them in. For example, Dignitas is one. Like, I'm good friends with the vice president of partnerships there. That's a bit of a tongue twister for me there. And look, they haven't got anything too groundbreaking yet, but they've got the naming sponsor with a betting company. That company is an absolute pile of shit, I'm going to say though, and I do not fuck with them whatsoever. Vi.gg, esports entertainment group, pile of shit. But nonetheless, they're giving Dignitas money, helping them survive. So That's something, and look, that they're doing decent things, like they've got Verizon on, and they're just partnered with Zenny for their FE with their kind of woman only initiative that they're going on, and look, like they have multiple people working in partnerships, like actively going out, not only cultivating the relationships, but making sure that once they've been established, that is ongoing, and that they're happy and that they can evolve them over time. It's not just a case of I reach out to hypothetically Durex and say, look, give me $100,000 for this year, and we'll put your logo on our jersey, and that's it. Like, there's nowhere near that. And look, it all also depends on how you decide you want to, or the value proposition that you can give to these prospective partners and sponsors, right? And also, there's different levels here, as affiliate and as sponsor and as partners. So it's easy to band them all together. But some teams are actually just affiliates, but claiming they're partners. And like, there's very different things involved in that partnership. You both devise a plan and work together on it, on campaigns and stuff. Sponsorships, they'll give you free shit. Affiliate, you get a discount code or something, right? There's varying levels, and it's the partnerships you want to be going for. And that's something I think we need to be more mindful of when it's announced, like actually paying attention to what level of relationship there is there. And also, yeah, just reach out to people. Like, there's no harm in it. Like this goes for everything in life. Like, if you want something, you reach out and ask, and if you don't get it, then the worst that happens is they say no. The best that happens is you fucking get that shit. So, for me, yeah, if they're not doing that, then they need to hire adequate people who actually have business experience, as opposed to just enjoying gaming and watching people game. And that's the problem we've got in esports at the moment, where it's like, oh, I'm qualified to work in esports for your professional organization that's funded millions because I love League of Legends. It's like, nah, fuck that shit. That's why we see organizations grab people from traditional sports and such, right? Because they have experience. So we need more of those who actually know how to do outreach.
Yeah, and I think it's more like people will reach out to the big names, and then once they do that, they're like, well, we tried. Where it's like, you have to go after these. As far as like brands coming to teams, that worries me as well, being like, Chaos, we've been in the top 30 for the better part of the year, and the top 20 for most of that as well. That it's like, if I am Googling Counter-Strike, if I find the world rankings and I look as a sponsor that I might want to get into it, I'm not going to get all the way down to those teams most likely, because somebody's going to say yes before them. So that's where like your proactivity comes in, where it's like, these different things where potentially, like you said, if you would have just asked, those guys were like, oh yeah, like we were looking to get into this, we just had no idea how. Like, we were about to message Cloud9 next week, and it's like all of a sudden you potentially get that deal instead of somebody else. But like, the proactive part of it has to be there. The business savvy sense has to be there, where it's like, they always say one no is closer to your next yes and things like that. But it's like, if people don't have that experience of different things like that, it becomes very difficult for them. Or because we're gamers, not everyone is as gifted socially in terms of talking and expressing ideas and being able to get by. Like, somebody maybe stonewalling you at first, where they're just trying to like weigh you out or judge you, where it's like, if you don't have the social experience and things like that, you may just be like, oh shit, okay, never mind. Where it's like, they were just trying to push you a little farther to determine whether or not you're an actual human being, if you're there for the right reasons, et cetera, et cetera.
No, I definitely agree with what you're both saying. Like, people aren't really trying hard enough to find opportunities. And that's always been a problem with the scene, even at like much, much lower levels. Like, say, like MDL players just looking for new teams. Like, people post a tweet and then like that's it. Like, they're like,
Yeah,
hey, like
LFT.
nobody said anything. Yeah, like nobody messaged me back. So what am I supposed to do? Like, no, you have to go out and you have to message teams who you think might be looking to make changes or are looking to try people out. Like, it's the same applies to sponsors and new organizations. Like, when you're looking for a team, like if you're not actively searching and messaging people and talking to people about what they're looking for and what they're expecting in a team, like, you're never going to find anything. And that's what I've been trying to do, and I'm sure that's what Matt's been trying to do. Like, we're just messaging tons of people, right, Matt?
No,
Nothing. You're just sitting back and waiting.
I literally.
Yeah.
I mean, we're still sponsored, actually. Never mind. We are currently sponsored and A-OK.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but it's like we're just trying our best to find something, and I've been getting no's. I've been getting people who seem interested, but then at the end of the day, they aren't willing to offer what we would like, or like it just comes down to talking to people, and at the end, and hopefully something works out from there.
Yeah, we've been like, I think we're one of the luckiest teams in North America with the sponsor that we acquired. Chaos has been nothing but like great to us. Like I can't lie, I can't even pick out things that I'm like, these guys weren't fantastic for us. I've been very lucky throughout my career to be on great organizations as well. And like, I think the difference between those guys that is like, they actually care. Like we have meetings with, our GM, different things like that all the time, that it's like, we've been very updated throughout this whole thing, where it's like, it kind of caught us off guard, but at the same time we knew like different things going on. But like, even now they're like actively trying to help us reach out to different entities and organizations and things. Whereas like I've been with an org before where I talked to them once and that was like it. They don't try to keep track. And I love these like more grassroots orgs where like it's very easy to work with people that understand your game versus like, somebody that's just in it to like try to get investment money to try to do this, et cetera, versus like the people that care. Where like it might not have worked out, but our experience was fantastic. Like I know that they were working hard. I know that they were trying to do this because they kept us in the loop the whole time. Where like I wish I would have thought, like what Adam said, to like reach out to like maybe these different brands that nobody's ever thought of. Because through talks and different things, I've heard of, certain like home security sponsors for a certain organization and things like that, that you're like, really, like they would be interested in, just things like this in general. And the way people need to start thinking of it is it's advertisement. It's probably much cheaper for them to potentially get their logo and thing out in front of like other people other ways than potentially buying like a commercial or things like that on TV. So especially trying to reach younger generations is like, this is where those brands like have a chance to like directly market to a certain age group. But I think like going back on the original topic, like, yeah, people are like, oh yeah, looking for team. Like I have no DMs. I have like nothing. Like, oh shit. Like, who would have thought that? I'm not going to say a team name. I was about to be really mean, but it's like these teams that have no marketability. They haven't won anything. They haven't like competed against upper tier teams or even in their division. It's like, you guys have to be realistic. It's like nobody's going to want to, like, why? That's, even us on Chaos at certain points, I'm like sitting there, I'm like, we have to do better. Like we have, a golden ticket, group of like our sponsor, everything. Like we have to be better than what we are right now. And like, I think some people, when they get in orgs, aren't pushing themselves hard enough, where it's like, they're just like, oh yeah, like we've made it, like whatever. It's like, no, like we want to do well. And you have to keep that throughout the whole time, where it's like, we were lucky enough to accomplish like a lot of things together, but it's like, there could have been a certain point in time where if we didn't make necessary changes or things like that, we would have failed as a team. And then it's like, you're just wasting everyone's time at that point, where it's like, not, you have to be good. We need to be better about forcing players to do marketing and things like that. And just like not bitching about stuff, where it's like, there's times where it's like, hey, we want you to retweet this. And somebody's like, oh, like I'll do it later. It's like, that, like, fuck, just do it. Like, please, and like those people shouldn't have to be reached out to multiple times. I'm not saying our team was an issue with that, but I've seen it in the past where it's like, just fucking do it. Like they're paying you. It's your fucking job. Like stop bitching about it. And like, there's definitely players that are divas that like give an interview after a game, man. Like what is the problem with this? I don't care if you don't want to do it. You're only going to get better. Like just fucking do it.
And that helps their personal brand if it's a good interview as well.
I was going to say the same thing. That's actually something I've been stressing with my team, since we're not exactly like as well known as some of the other players and orgs. Like I've been trying to stress, like, hey guys, like if they want you to do an interview, like do that shit. Like it's good for you. You'll get your name out there. You'll get your face out there, so people know who they're watching. Like more people should be willing to do that.
Yeah, I think it's almost a no-brainer for up and coming players to do this. Is actually one of the topics that I had of conversation that I had with Tolkien fanatic Joe Cardelli when I interviewed him earlier in the week. He said something to the same effect of like, it's no longer a point in time. We're past the point where you can just be good at the game, and that can get you to wherever you need to go financially. You also need to be somewhat competent at the social game, at the social media game, at sort of leveraging your growing media platform, as weird as that sounds, to achieve new heights in a business sense as well. Another thing that you guys all independently touched on was essentially the opposite angle to what we were initially talking about, of essentially the orgs and the players being quality for the sponsors themselves. But there's also, I think, ways where the sponsorships, these deals, these partnerships can actually be more beneficial, not only for them, but also for the orgs and for the players. Essentially, like things that these sponsorships in theory could be doing to get more activations, I guess is the term for it on a technical level, but in a way that feels very natural for the scene. I mean, Matt, you talked about the sponsorships or some of these advertised products, essentially treating it as advertising in your head. If you think about it that way, it comes to fruition in a different fashion where you're starting to conceptualize it as, okay, I'm getting this logo in front of people, but in a way, we've all sort of tuned out a lot of the logos. And so now they're coming out with, like, on the Blast show that's going on recently, they come out with these more elaborate animations that show the logo and the website and whatever the case may be in a bit more of an elaborate manner, and tries to catch your eye in a bit of a different way. So now it's unavoidable, but is it really the same thing as if we have a sponsored segment of the broadcast where their logos in the background and we tie it into whatever the sponsorship actually is? Like, obviously the big one is like CS Money, which is a skin site. But if we look to maybe that Kia website or the Kia dealership that we were talking about earlier, where we have the players test out the cars, the players drive the cars around, like that would be an obvious activation for the sponsorship. And safety concerns aside, that would obviously be a case where, okay, now you've made content, you've upped the value of the actual advertisement section of the sponsorship, and you've activated it in a different way, but you've also done it in a different way where the players themselves, the orgs themselves, are also getting a bit more exposure, and it's sort of appearing more lifelike and less just in the server, less just about the game itself, which is a big deal for their own personal brand. So this is another sort of angle where I think you could take a lot of different approaches to this one, but as a sort of circling back, is this an approach, Muenster? You think that if you end up, you go off into the future and you've signed up with a new team at some point, and like things are looking good, but in the initial vetting process, before you decide which team to sign with or whether or not to accept a certain deal, is this something where you're going to be more like essentially on the ball or concerned with the ongoings, given that it's almost come out? You said you sort of figured it was coming in a way, the Whalers' departure, but even still, like when it happens, it's a bit of a different, like, oh shit, it's real. Now I've got to deal with it. Is this something where you're going to be, unfortunately, you have to almost dedicate some part of your brain power to thinking about like, this is what is the fate of this organization? How sustainable are they? Is this something that's going to be more on your mind going forward?
Yeah, definitely. Like being on the Whalers and has been great. Like Diego's been amazing. He's always been straightforward about everything. He's always been there to like help us moving forward. But like definitely going forward from this team to any other team, if we ever find one, I'm definitely going to be more focused on making sure that they're getting the most out of us as a team and as individuals, branding and marketing wise. If I join a team and they're not actively like trying to get us to do like media type stuff, content, whatever, that's definitely a sign that they might not be in it for the long term. And I'll probably be like, when I'm discussing or reaching out to organizations and other entities, that we kind of work a deal out that it also involves like content and media type stuff to really like build on the player brands and help us as well as individuals like build our own brands too.
You just got to be careful you don't overdo it and like distract anything from the server side. And it's something I was thinking as well, like when say you're a team that's not sponsored, not part of an organization, right? Like that, and you're trying to make it professional, or you have been professional and you've been released, the pressure of trying to find a paying home could well impact your performance in the server if it's like stopping you from sleeping at night, or like making practice worse, or you're more frustrated within yourself and you're arguing with your teammates and stuff, which then could impact in-game performance, which could then actually impact your chances of of being successful in finding a new home down the line. So it also, maybe to me, seems like it seems a really difficult one. Like you need like a business manager or somebody else, like a manager, as well as the coach and the players who can actually deal with it, with the business dealings. And I mean, it's almost unfair in my opinion to have like a coach or players who obviously specialize in in-game dealings to then have to go out and court these business deals. Like how do they know what best practices are, right? They're just nerds who manage to somewhat make it work for themselves. You know, it seems like a very tough, almost paradoxical in that sense, situation.
Yeah, I'm definitely not experienced in this at all. So I'm pretty much just going with the flow, like winging it and learning it as I go along. I definitely think like I'm not young by any means. Like I'm 26 years old, so like I have experience like out in the real world. Like I've been working since I was 14. Like I know how to deal with people. So I definitely think that I have a good chance at helping our team find something on that side. But I don't pretend to be an expert. I don't pretend to know exactly what I'm doing. Like when I like am in talks with somebody, like I'm running everything by my teammates. Like, hey guys, like I just want to make sure this is okay. Like, am I on the right track here? Like I do the same thing with Diego. Like I've talked to him a few times about helping me, and like he's also putting in words for me, like trying to get me along and like get me in contact with certain people. So I'm just really just doing my best. Like since we left or since we were announced as free agents, like I've also, picked up the mantle of manager. So just taking it one step at a time, doing my best.
Well, one thing I do wonder about, why isn't Rivalry sponsored Chaos yet, considering they're under the same ownership and nobody seems to say anything about it ever?
I don't have an answer for you. That's not, my...
Perfect. That's all. I just wanted to bring that up quickly while I could.
So, I mean, I don't have anything. There's, a couple things that have reached out to me that I've tried to bring up or whatever, that it could be not what they're looking for, et cetera, et cetera. Like, I have no idea. Like, I don't deal with that. If I have ideas or anything, I always take it to, mostly content, things like that. Because I'm an idiot and also creative at the same time. So, like, I do have horrible ideas that, have gone well for us, but also, like, they weren't that funny at the same time. But like, yeah, it just could be, that same closed-mindedness. Not that like they're meaning to do it. It's like things that are obvious to somebody else, that it's like, if you had multiple people in that position instead of maybe just one person, that they're like, oh shit, like how did we not think of this to ask these people? Like it could very well be something like that. I don't handle that. I'm not sure. So
what do you make of this angle that I brought up earlier about sponsorships sort of doing these activations in terms of content?
G2, for instance, like I'm a huge G2 fan in LCS or the LEC now or whatever, where they had them do the driving test, where they took them out, and I think they're sponsored by BMW, and they had them like try these different things. And I think it's hilarious. Like every time you get these people, especially like I was talking about some of these kids that aren't as good socially and stuff, and you just throw them in that, it's like added, just hilarity sometimes and like things that happen. So, but yeah, I mean, I think it's one thing I would love to see, which they're starting to do more, is like whenever they show Chaos, which like obviously we don't have anything, so they couldn't do it. But it's like you're showing a team and introducing a team. I guess it's broadcasting rights and things that go into that. But like if my team is being shown as like, let's say, like Totino's Pizza Rolls, if my team is up on the screen, where's my logo? Like during these online broadcasts, where it's like, if you're going to go through the thing to put the team up, like obviously it's broadcast rights and fighting sponsors. Like if Blast is sponsored by, I don't know, Kroger brand of pizza rolls, like they can't put the Totino's ones up there on the screen, I'd imagine, and things like that. But like as an org, I would be fighting for that as my, like, to try to keep my sponsors happy and things like that, where it's like, if you're showing my brand, like, because they'll go through and like they have the Chaos thing for, IEM Beijing, where it showed the shirt or whatever, the jerseys that we have, where it's like, if we had sponsors and title sponsors, like they better be there. Like if you're going to go through that much effort, or even when you introduce the teams and like the part on the screen where it's like, Vanity, Zeppa, Leaf, like I think it would be very easy to have those title sponsors in there as well. But I think that comes into the conflict and different things like that. But like, I would love to see it more. But like, also these organizers have their own sponsors that are bringing in money that like they have to show, and that's why you see the black tape on headsets for stuff, because like they're not allowed to show that. You'll see us drinking out of thermoses and stuff, or like you'll see bottled water that have the labels and stuff ripped off, because it's like there's so many rules in terms of that. But like, I think there can be more done, or like a little bit, looser for some things to help out these teams so that they do get it guaranteed. Because like right now, you're not seeing anything like interviews, whatever. It's not showing full jersey. It's not showing things like that, or where you would see it on these games where it's like, half the time it's people just sitting in t-shirts in their living room or whatever, that it's like, if I'm a brand sponsor and I'm used to being like, oh, like rivalry, what is that? Like, I'm going to go Google that and look it up and then potentially get into it. That's not there anymore. Like, so I think that's a huge issue that has to be addressed because we're not going back to LAN, anytime soon at this point. So people have to be creative and switch things around a bit. And I think that would be a nice touch, is like, if you're showing my team's stuff, like, please show everything involving like my team while you're introducing the team at least. And that would ease partner relations and things like that. I don't know. I'm just, guessing, but I would hope it would.
Adam, it looks like you're struggling to keep whatever is in your mind.
No,
from falling out of your mouth.
No. I've got a lot of. No, I'm just thinking. I think there's a lot to be done in general in gaming advertisement, right? So I don't think it's necessarily like a CS issue or player issue or something. So you look at what League of Legends has just done again. So we'll go back to Riot Games, Valorant, and such. But with the in-game banners, like that's one small aspect of what can be done, but it's a huge step forward. So you've got your Honda and your Mastercard Alienware, Oppo, all having in-game banners at like the biggest stages. So not only LCS and LEC, but at Worlds. So you could have like some player getting a pentakill and right next to the Honda logo, right? And then how you determine that value is depending on who you go with. Like Nielsen are the kind of de facto at the moment to judging and monetizing and valuing those placements. And if there's rev share in place, say if it's a league like the LEC, for example, where you buy in and there's rev share, or like the CDL or Overwatch League, then that's going to happen. But we haven't got any equivalent of that in CS. And I know earlier we mentioned about Valve needing to step in, and it's strange because you either have to almost accept a monopoly from ESL, or you have to root for Flashpoint, or you have to hope for a monopoly or just complete takeover and almost an authoritarian stuff with Valve, right? Where they step in and they piss ESL off and Flashpoint off and Blast off and everyone else who's operating. So I think there's going to be a lot of loss, no matter what, in these hypotheticals that we're bringing up. But if Valve were to do that, that'd be cool. But if they were to introduce sprays for events or something like that, or like certain graffiti on walls during particular events where, I don't know, like Betway sponsors ESL events, for example, or Pinnacle with Flashpoint, just so I'm not showing any bias by any means there, and put them on the walls or integrate them further, because just slapping a logo on anything doesn't create anything. You have to make someone feel something for it to really resonate. So that's why content's good. It's not just because it's funny. It's like, oh no, it's memorable. Like this content's cool, but like just having the logo, that isn't going to do too much. You have to actually integrate them properly. And that's on both sides of the equation. That's on the partners or the potential partners, so the companies that are paying, and it's on the teams. And G2, the way they've set themselves up, it's not just like a brand voice. It's like every aspect of what they do, it's integrated. So it's insane. And they're like Evil Geniuses, they don't really do that, in my opinion. Like, for example, like they have Razer and Muenster, like just the most boring partnerships of all time. And they'll just maybe create a new feature or a new content series and just say presented by blah, blah, blah. But like, if that's the level of integration we've got, then I hope the partners leave your house and go to someone who's going to be like more grateful about it and actually try and bring you more value, right? So I've just spewed a lot there, but just thinking there's plenty to go on. That's the thing. And the thing is, we can speculate all this stuff, but the best part about it is nothing will change.
So it seems. There was actually one of the sort of sponsored segments that I have a pretty fond memory of. I think it was a Sennheiser. The problem is I'm trying to talk about big game about how these sponsorships help, and I actually don't remember the brand at all. But it was a headset brand, and it was back when in the NRG days where Tarek was like, "I need you, Daps. I need you to help me. I need your calling," and he's like, "Don't worry, with these headphones, it's like I'm in the room." And then like they had a scene where like Tarek laid back and Daps's hands just like reached out from behind him and started grabbing the keyboard, or like wrapped around his hands or something goofy like that. Like that's a situation where we're actually creating content that has value objectively or whatever. Like there's value to the content, and then you realize, oh yeah, it's also an advertisement, and that's how there's like you said, Adam, making people feel something. In this case, sexual tension, which is still fine, still sells some stuff, obviously. So maybe we can we go further with some of your yeah, exactly. With your Durex fuck it brand deals or whatever the case may be.
I'm going to pitch that to all my partnership friends, and I'm going to get a percentage of whoever successfully gets Durex to create a campaign called Fuck It.
It's genius.
Surely they've already done something like that, so I can't imagine it would be brave new territory for that brand in particular. So surely they would come in and do.
Are you trying to take away from my amazing off the cuff idea right now?
No, I'm just saying that it's all they're primed to be activated with it. That's all I'm saying.
For sure, they are. Yeah.
All right, so it sounds like we've come to some sort of agreement that not only have all of us have some interesting ideas down the years, and specifically in this show, but also nothing will change, according to what Adam said. But I did want to sort of capstone this episode just by talking a bit about, again, sort of like going back to the initial question, which was like, what do you guys feel is the biggest issue with the individual pieces? Obviously, we talked about at that point, like sponsorships. We talked about expenses, usually player salaries. We talked about the stability of individual teams and stuff like that. So if I could get your individual pieces on essentially maybe some things that this episode, this conversation had you think a little bit differently about, if I could get your pieces on essentially ways where the scene might be able to improve, even if it's just in incremental small ways. I am curious about your takes on that. So Muenster, I'm going to throw you into the hot seat. I know you weren't 100% prepared for this exact kind of conversation, but I thought your perspective was valuable as a person who essentially was coming in, learning all of this stuff, like you said, just on, off the cuff. You're trying to fly by the seat of your pants and you're trying to learn all that stuff. So bearing in mind what you've had to learn very recently and very quickly, what do you think some of the solutions that you might be able to envision going forward for any of the topics we covered today, or even the ones that are more specific to what you're dealing with now?
I think one thing we didn't really talk about, but is like on the player side of things, I think players just need to get that passion and drive to take them and to like try and work towards a higher level again. I feel like I'm not seeing that as much as I used to back when the NA scene was like really doing well, when we had tons of big name orgs in the scene. I think if players show that they're willing to go with less money and willing to just really grind at the NACS scene again, then I think orgs and tournament organizers and all those people will start seeing that again and are going to be much more likely to be willing to like risk investments into the scene. So at the end of the day, I think it really comes down to the players. I think the players have to be wanting to play well and improve. Otherwise, like nothing's going to change. Like Adam said.
Well, all right, Matt, what's your take here? What do you think are some maybe some low hanging fruit that might be able to be improved, or some sort of simple issue in theory, simple that you might be able to have a solution to?
Everyone needs to work together more. Like you, with some of it's not necessarily relying on brands, but like if I'm an org and I'm working with somebody like Red Bull or whatever, I would ask for ideas from their marketing team as well. And I think people might not think of that. Of course, I'm talking out my ass, so I don't know. But you have so many ideas like Adam here who people may not necessarily think to ask and be like, hey, like just open it up. Like literally you have such a large platform on Twitter sometimes that you're just like, hey, like we need some ideas for content, like best idea or whatever gets, like we'll do a lesson, we'll do a meet and greet, obviously not now, or like we'll send you a care package from like the org. And like there's so many people out there with good ideas that like You just have to include like more people. Whether that's, if I go to an org and be like, hey, we're new to this, we want to do like these pieces of content or whatever, but we don't know how to do it. Like, do you have any ideas to help with that? I think would be a big step. And I think people just need to work harder in general as players and things that, like we're saying, it's not so much about, doing well and that's the end all be well. Like, you have to help more and more as a player. You have to be willing to do more content pieces and like actually care about it. Like, just phoning in a performance while you're doing it or like whatever, like just actually do it and not be forced to do things. And it goes a long way in terms of, doing things like that. So I think players have to be more selfless about it. I think the entitlement needs to be dropped a couple notches for different things. And then, we try to go from there and, do the best that we can.
Adam, why don't you end us off here on a high note?
Okay, so it's up to me to fix Counter-Strike Esports.
Yeah,
right
just small talk, obviously. No problem.
Okay. The best way to fix it is to cut the salaries of players at the moment. The thing is, none of them are voluntarily going to want to do it, right? But that is realistically the key. We need a reset on salaries because that is the huge drain right now. Travel is, of course, an expense, but a lot of it's covered by TOs. So, okay, the main thing that needs to happen is we need to pay them less because they're not giving us the value back. Simple as orgs need to grow some bollocks, basically. The players have too much power anyway. They can control who's on their roster. If you're like Nico, you have FaZe Clan by the bollocks. Like organizations, basically, they should have more leverage than what they currently have, and that's because they're giving it away. They're relinquishing control over it. Look, like, we have the money. You want our money? Okay, you play by our rules. Then we will, of course, keep you happy, but we're not going to take any shit. We're not going to let you just like mess us over, right? So I think, yeah, it's a case of if players want the scene to be better, then maybe they need to sacrifice a little bit. Say if you're on 25k, maybe drop that down to 12.5k. I'm sure you'll be able to survive. And if we get in a good spot, then maybe you'll reach 25k yet again. And just the fact that you've ever reached that amount, just count your lucky stars that you were getting that because you were not worth it.
Like, it would be a lot healthier and like these orgs would still be around if I'm an org and I could have been paying 25k a month versus like having to pay, what is that? Let's go with just 10 to make it easy. Like 50k a month, 60k a month for like these 2 years. Like, there's a lot more to go around. So like, I do agree with that. I think players are very overpaid in general. That like, there needs to be some form of like almost like you can't be paid more than this with like a contract, and then that's where your brand presence, your streaming can be a different contract with them on top of that, because it's completely out of control right now. Like, I'm going to use Fallen again, but it's like if I have a NAF versus a Fallen, let's say they're paid the same amount of money. I don't think they're worth the same amount of money. Like, Fallen had Gamers Club, he had all these other things on top of it, where like NAF's a fantastic fucking player, don't get me wrong. But like, if I had the choice of two for $10,000, I'm going to go with Fallen because he provides me the extra things. Whereas they might be getting paid the same, but Fallen is worth so much more to an org, to a brand, to whatever, that like, I think you need to start splitting contracts where it's like CS steps in and like the max a player can be paid is this, and then it's the org's responsibility on top of that for like content, for streaming, for whatever, and actually force the players to do that. Because I think it's like right now, if I'm on a team and I'm getting 10 and all of a sudden somebody else comes in and they're like, I'll pay you 20. It's like, I might go to that team, But if the other team is like, I'll give you 10, and the next team's like, yeah, you can only get 10. It's like, well, I'm going to try harder as a player maybe to produce the content so I can get that extra amount that I want. Or it's going to be better, in my opinion, for orgs at that point, because they're at least then, if they're paying extra value, hopefully they're getting extra, value out of that player.